I've been with Lowe's for about 8.5 years now. Lowe's was set up in 2014, right? And it started as an experiment. And currently, I think we have roughly about 4,000 people, and a significant portion of the team, works on data and analytics as a function. Before I go into this topic, right, just by raise of hands, how many of you have seen data mesh implementation at scale? All right. How many of you are aware of data mesh as a practice? Good. So I think these slides will probably do justice, right? So as you can see in this topic today, what I'm going to talk about is I'll give you a preview of what data mesh is, right? But mostly it is going to be a practitioner's view. And what that means is what we have done on data mesh. And we are in this journey, right? We haven't completely finished it, but we have made quite a lot of progress and it is helping us a lot. So we'll cover what we have accomplished, how we are leveraging it, as well as what benefits we have gotten from this. So this is purely going to be a practitioner's view. This is not going to be a deep dive into what data mesh is. Before I go into details, if you go to the next slide. Little bit about who we are. We are a Fortune 50, $97 billion company, right? And just to give you the idea of scale, 97 billion worth of transactions flow through our systems, right? Which means all this data gets generated, right? Item data, catalog data, transactional data, customer data, all of the data flows through our systems and ultimately lands up in our data ecosystem. We are also world's second largest home improvement retailer, right? We are number one in appliances, but overall we are number two in terms of our size and scale. We operate in a lot of categories. We have 15 to 18 categories that we operate on, starting from lumber, electricals, plumbing, lawn and garden. So you name it, anything around home building or home improvement, we have it in our stores or online. Most of our sales come from our stores, followed by online and followed by contact center. 1,700 stores spread out the US. We are fully US based home improvement retailer. We had businesses in Canada, but now we are only focused on the US market. We serve almost 19 million plus customers every week, right? So you can imagine the kind of customer database we have. Right, 19 million interaction and touch points week on week, right? And it keeps changing. Customer master is a big use case for us. I spoke about the Lowe's India Capability Center, started in 14, started with analytics as the first capability. And then we built tech capabilities, and now we have 4,000 strong overall team here. It has technology, which is predominantly the workforce, and then we have analytics, and then followed by business services. So a little bit of flavor just to give you an idea of when we talk of data, what kind of data sets are we talking about, right? Before I go into details, right? Before I go into details of data mesh, also wanted to share a little bit when we moved into data mesh, what were we trying to solve for? Why did we move into data mesh? And I know many of you in this room will probably have seen similar challenges across when you have a central data team, right, which is serving for all your needs. What it means is you probably have a data warehouse and a central team managing all your pipelines, serving the business, building reports, building dashboards, building ML models, but all of those requests are coming to this central team, right? What it means is there is no domain knowledge, right? You can have a person working on pricing, and the same person can tomorrow work on marketing, and another they can work on finance, right? But when the question comes around building a superior finance products, we don't have in-depth domain knowledge. And we saw that happening in our ecosystem. Other challenge we faced was delivery, right? I mean, if you have a huge backlog, you're not going to be able to deliver everything for your business. So there's always a delayed delivery, there's a backlog, there is frustration on the business side. We all of us saw that. A lot of times we go back to business saying we will deliver it, right? Before our peak season, which is on Black Friday, you need this, and we are not able to deliver it. But most important for us was the extreme right, which you see change management challenges. So Lowe's also was undergoing a huge business and a tech transformation. What it meant was all our transactional systems are changing. Predominantly, we were working with product vendors, right? Let's say for order management, we are leveraging Sterling. And now we have sunset Sterling. We moved on to build our own ground-up products, in-house products. So if your transactional systems are changing, what should happen on the data side? Right? You have to adapt. You have to make sure you are in lockstep with what's happening on the transactional system. One of the core reasons why we thought data mesh makes a lot of sense for us, and we will see how that principle helps us. But these were predominantly, 4 challenges that we thought if we move to the data mesh architecture can give us really a good benefit. So these were our objectives. What we wanted was our business was changing, it is getting transformed, our tech teams are getting transformed. We said we need to have agility in our process, the way we work. We should be able to build our data products really, really quickly. Like we don't want to be in a backlog situation. Anything that is urgent, anything that is important, we should be able to build really quickly with great accuracy and with the objective of meeting the final end product that business needs. So agility was always on the top of our mind when we moved into the data mesh architecture. Like I said, change management, most of our transactional system, Lowe's being a 100-year-old company, all the transactional systems were undergoing a huge change. Right? You are ripping apart your transactional systems, which means all your data pipelines were getting changed. Right? And imagine, Lowe's being a public company, you are reporting your data back to the street, right? You're having your financial reports, you're having your compliance reports. When all of that is changing, we wanted to make sure whatever we report in the new data system holds good. Right? You can't go wrong in terms of what you're reporting financially. So change management was a huge, huge process in terms of moving into data mesh architecture. Domain knowledge, right? So with respect to domain knowledge, right? Let's say our pricing systems or our promo systems, or even when you look at our marketing system, we wanted to make sure when I go and talk to a data analyst or a data engineer, they are able to talk about what does it mean to be in the pricing team? How do we do our competitive pricing? What happens when you do price scaling? How we are able to leverage that? So that when we build our data products, it is really superior in nature. So that's why domain knowledge was a key requirement for us to move into the data mesh architecture. Lastly, data democratization, right? A very, very hyped and overused word, right? A lot of people say, what do you mean by data democratization? And even if you ask in this room, you will probably get 10 different versions. For us, what it meant was, if a senior leader says, I want to look at a metric, let's say a cycle time, right? Inventory cycle time. How much time does it take for me to get data from my vendor all the way up to when it comes into my system and all the way when it goes out to the customer? That cycle time definition can have 20 different meanings. So with this, what we said is if you go and look up in our data catalog and search for cycle time, you should get a one consistent answer, what is the cycle time. Similarly for net sales, similarly for a gross margin, similarly for any other metric that we will publish, and we probably will have more than 20,000 metrics overall in our ecosystem. So this democratization for us was the capability and the ability for our users to search for a data set, for them to go and look at the lineage, right? Where is this data coming from, right? Look at, is this data set certified for me to use in my report, in my dashboard? And lastly, can I trust this data, right? So those were, I think, our overall objectives when we said, we want to move into data mesh architecture. And briefly touch upon this slide. What do we mean by data mesh? What are the principles? And what did we think from a key call-out perspective? So, the overall, core principle of data mesh is to make sure that the data is managed really in an appropriate way through data domains, right? And you create data domains and assign people, right? So that's your first vertical. There are 4 principles that you see overall in the data mesh architecture, and this is a purist view, right? You may go into implementing this kind of architecture and be really a purist. Like in cricket, you have people who are fully technical, right? But are they fit for T20? Maybe not, right? But something here which you will see, and then you will probably see what has Lowe's done in terms of implementing the data mesh architecture. So domain ownership, bounded context, if you have a pricing team, is responsible only for pricing data, right? You're not going to worry about what happens on promo. These are going to be two separate services talking to each other through our interface, right? We'll talk about it. We form separate teams, right? So we have a separate finance team, we have a separate merchandising or item team, we have a separate, let's say, a stores team, right? Like I said, most of our revenue flows to stores, so we wanted to make sure we are providing that resource and the capability back to the store so that they can get what they need from an analytics perspective. So that's the first vertical, right? You want to make sure that the domain is the focus. Second, there was a topic I think earlier, I don't know if some of you attended, data as a product, right? What do we mean by data as a product? So when these domain teams are working on data, right, when they're building their ecosystem, they should think of data as a product. And I'll explain what I mean with that. So let's say I'm in the finance vertical and I'm getting my data into my ecosystem. Typically, I'll get the transactional data, I'll dump it into the data lake or into a data warehouse, and I'll forget about it. Let the consumption happen. Right? With data as a product, teams start to think about who's going to use my data. How should I publish my data so that it is in a consumable format? And lastly, when I build my data ecosystem, I think of customer first. And my customer could be another domain, right? Pricing, I'm building a product, my customer could be merchandising team, my customer could be, let's say, a promo team, my customer could be an order team. And I'll explain how that works, right? So we said we should think, when we divide into a domain team, everybody has to think data as a product. You always have to keep the end customer in mind. You can't avoid that. Right? And that's why we said data product by domain team. And each of these are focusing on specific capabilities. And lastly, how these domains interact with each other is through interfaces. Lastly, the third is self-serve data platform. So data platform has to be agnostic. It is not domain specific. And what it means is, if let's say you are ingesting data, it is not going to be domain specific. Pricing team, promo team, your finance team, marketing team, anybody can use that standard interface, get your data. Right? You form specific data platform team, which is again a horizontal. Lastly, they should be able to self-serve. We don't have to tell the product team how to get the data into the ecosystem. They should be able to just use the tools and get the data into the ecosystem. Lastly, federated governance. Data mesh says you should have your governance team embedded into each of the domains. Lowe's did not do that, and I'll talk about why and how. It talks about context mapping. This is where I spoke about metrics. You are telling what metric is what, and who is using it, when they are using it, how they are using it. You can form guilds. Data mesh says form guilds, which means all the domains can have their representatives. They come and they work together, and then they can provide best practices, share best practices across the domains. And lastly, data governance, automation, and things. Right? So this, I think, is a very, very purest view of if you are creating really a data mesh and want to follow all the procedures, this is what you should do. Right? And there are some call-outs, but let me jump to what we did. Right? This is a domain model that we have at Lowe's. And if you look at this, these are core retail domains. Right? Anybody who is in retail will know that pricing and promotion is definitely key. But the most core domain is towards the right, merchandising. Right? Within retail ecosystem, merchandising is all about what should I buy, when should I buy, how much should I buy, where should I keep it. So everything in merchandising is core for us, right? So we said merchandising should represent as one core domain, and then there are technical teams, there are transactional teams which are tied to these domains. And that makes sense for us. Finance, super important domain, right? Everything works for finance. So finance is again a key domain. So I think just to give you a flavor of this is how our domains are. These are super domains. Then there are subdomains underneath, and I'll give you a flavor of how that looks like. But this represents all the domains. And if you look at the central platform team, like I said, this is a horizontal. Right? This team serves all the domains. And data ingestion platform is one, right? We call it DIP within Lowe's, but that's a horizontal for us, right? Governance is a horizontal for us. We haven't kept governance within each domain because we thought it is an overkill. And so we have kept the governance at a central platform. A storage platform is central. Right? I'm going to give you a flavor of what are the different topologies that you can use in data mesh in one of the latest slides, but we have kept a centralized data lake on how our data flows in. But this is overall the domain model that we follow at Lowe's. Now, what is the data domain architecture that we are leveraging? Right? This is, I think, one of the crux of the entire data mesh architecture that we follow at Lowe's. And I'll probably spend a little bit of time for you to give an understanding of how this thing entire operates. So if you can understand this slide, you would have understood the data mesh architecture at Lowe's, right? So item is part of our merchandising domain, right? When this side is our source systems, right? And then you see the Kafka topics right in the middle, right, which are pushing data. Data ingestion platform is our homegrown ingestion platform leveraged across Lowe's. Right? We are not leveraging any proprietary tools. Most of the products that we use are homegrown, right, within data ecosystem. So we are a build versus buy. In the build versus buy ecosystem, we are more of a build company, right, even in our transactional system. So with the data also, we use a lot of open source products. I'll not go technical on those, but we'll give you a flavor. If there are questions, I can answer. Then I think these three boxes, if you see, this is our data lake. Right? And we use Hadoop, Cloudera Hadoop as our data lake. We were on Hortonworks, migrated recently to Hadoop. And I'll explain why that was easier because of data mesh architecture. So the way it works is, source system has been changing all the time, right? Because we were transforming. Source system pushes data to item topic. Item topic, we have data ingestion platform. It pulls the data, pushes as raw data into the data lake. And data lake is responsible for having, domain-driven design, which means each data is segregated, it is siloed on how it will come in. So you get the raw data, and then the product team picks it up. Even the ingestion is responsibility of a product team. They pick it up, they cleanse it, if they need to put any business rules, they do all of that, and then that data goes into the second layer. We call that the silver layer. That is our cleans data. Once it is created, and then you can use it to create your metrics. Right? These we call it gold metrics, and I'll give some examples. So you see this is item layer, then you have an invoicing layer, you have a customer layer, right? Like that, there are multiple layers, and then there are data pipelines which are pushing data into our data lake. Now what happens is, let's say I worked on my finance data, my orders data. I got all the data in, and I created a metric called net sales. Right? Net sales in the previous world. In the previous world, I will, as a finance team, I'll create my net sales. But merchandising team, they will also get their data, and then they'll create another view of net sales. Right? Gross sales. Similarly, customer data comes in, but customer data is ownership of customer team. But in the earlier world, anybody could use any customer data without any certification on the metrics. In the new world, what we are changing is, we said, only finance is responsible for net sales, nobody else. Because they are the owners of the data. So we define that as an ownership with the finance team. Nobody else can modify finance data, nobody else can ingest finance data, only finance team can. Same thing with item data. Only merchandising team will handle finance data. Anything that needs to change, let the item team handle it. Then how do I access the data? Right? And that's where your gold metrics come in. So once I build my metric, I'm going to publish it for others to consume. Net sales, once it is published, can be used by others. So for example, let's say my leadership says, I want to see per square feet sales at a store level. How much I am selling per square feet. And that's a retail comparison, which everybody uses. Or I want to see category sales. Right? How do I do that? So that's where what happens is, the merchandising team will pick up the net sales from the gold metric and create a metric called category sales. And they will be responsible for it. Net sales is responsibility of finance team, but your category sales and your per square feet sales is responsibility of merchandising team. Similarly, customer sales is responsibility of your marketing team. They will provide that as a metric. Nobody else will provide that metric. And that is sorting out a lot of issues for us, right? And I'll give you an example, right? So Net sales is used by many people in many different reports. With this, there is another layer which is not shown here. I know there was a session on semantics layer. We have Trino as a semantic layer, which means we are pushing all these goal metrics into Trino layer, and Trino is exposing that to any consumer that wants to use it. And that becomes a semantic layer, and that's providing accessibility to anybody who wants to use this metric. Then I think your data transformation, data quality, again, are horizontal. So all infrastructure, platform capabilities, we have kept it as a horizontal. This is not embedded in a domain. We are not giving that leverage to the domain teams, including our data discovery and governance. This remains a horizontal. Right? So that's a high-level view on how the entire ecosystem is working, how we are segregating data, how we are solving for ownership, and how we are ensuring that there is a single owner for the entire data ecosystem. So why do we call it paradigm shift? Right? That was a topic, right? And I think I use this example where we say transactional systems underwent a huge change when we broke down the monolith systems and we created microservices. And I feel data mesh is the closest analogy to that, right? You're breaking your entire single, whether a team structure or a single data ecosystem, and you're breaking it into domains. And that's very analogous to anything that you do on your transactional system. You use a monolith and then you divide it into domains. There are domain teams, and then domain teams talk to each other through interfaces. And same thing has happened even on the data side. You are breaking that single ecosystem into multiple different services and letting that operate based on a domain concept. So just wanted to share that with you. I think for some of you it might connect really well. Now, after we did that, right, I thought this slide will tell you what all did we do, right, in order to reach this stage. So the first thing is ownership of data. Huge problem for us, right? We had pipelines which were running for decades, and to go and figure out who is the owner of data, how do you figure out the owner of data? So I think today we can proudly say that for each and every pipeline we have an owner identified. So when we migrated from Hortonworks over to Cloudera, it was very easy. It was very seamless. Right? People were able to seamlessly migrate away because everybody knew who the owner is. Tribal knowledge of data, right? Nobody knows what that metric means. When it gets built over a period of time, people have left organizations, we are not aware. Reliability, right? So this is something which we are still making progress on. How can we say when we certify the data, if something breaks, how can we ensure we can pass a message back to the consumer saying something is broken, this is certified, but there is a challenge with the data. And lastly, long time and learning curve for teams to get analytics for data. So I think self-service platform allows anybody to get data from a source into our data lake within minutes. And it goes very easy. It's very simple. It's a UI-based system. You can just, if you have the access, you can go connect to the source, pull your data, move it over into your data lake ecosystem. And then we are building tools where you can even transform your data, right? All in automated fashion. I think that is going to make life simpler for a lot of our data engineers. Data mesh variants, right? As I said, we will talk a little bit from a purist perspective. If you look at the first, fine-grained, fully federated mesh, right? This is the purist view. You have your domain and you have your data embedded within the domain. Right? This is the purist view of if you want to create a data mesh architecture. The middle one is fine-grained, fully governed mesh. In this is something that we use. We have a data lake setting in between, which is also used as a distributed layer. Hybrated federated mesh, and some of you might ask, why do we have that, right? When you're moving away from, let's say, a purist model to that model, or that model to this model, you will eventually end up being with the third one, right? And then eventually you will either go into this, or you may continue to operate in a hybrated federated mesh. Value chain aligned. This is where you might not want to share all your data with other domain teams. You have your domain interdependency, but there's no consistent pattern in this where each domain is talking to each other. It is very different compared to what you have on the top one. There might be certain use cases where you want to not share your one domain data with the other domain. You can probably use this. Coarse-grained aligned mesh. This is a use case where you may acquire, right? Your company may acquire 5 other companies. You have your domain architecture and you will go on connecting multiple domains to your other domains, and that's when I think this architecture makes sense. And then last one again is a combination of these two where you have a central layer. What do we use? I'm rushing through some of the slides in the interest of time. We use a fine-grained, fully governed mesh. The reason we use fully governed is because we thought we need to optimize our governance structure. But we wanted to have a domain ownership and a domain team. That's why we kept the domain team separate. Semantic layer and define your metrics for success, right? Why do you move into data mesh, right? So our success criteria was agility, change management, domain knowledge, data democratization. And I thought we are making good progress. We are not 100% done on this architecture, but we have made considerable progress. For example, we have put all our teams into a domain model. That is 100% done. Data certification, maybe we are 30 to 40% done. We are still making progress. Lastly, bring product thinking to data. It will change things for you. Right? When your teams start to think, you have product managers embedded into your ecosystem, you will really start to see value coming out of the data products that you're building. Lastly, I will say we didn't cover anything from an ML or an AI perspective, but this is helping us in a big way in terms of how do we leverage and how do we build ML products, right? When your data is available, and when your data science team needs to pull some data, our data integration platform just makes it very, very easy for them. You can pull from any source. It is connected to all the sources we have in our ecosystem, or even if you're getting external data, and get it into our data lake. Right? And then beyond that, our homegrown ML platform takes up. We have our completely open source based machine learning platform which we leverage, and it takes over from there. Right? And most of you might know that for machine learning, your 80% job is how do you get your data, how do you build your features. So all of that we are resolving through this architecture where you have certified data sets, you are making sure that your data is cleansed, if you need cleansed data, or if you need raw data, or if you need metadata data. So this is also helping us in a big way in terms of our machine learning journey. But yeah, like I said, these are the outcomes. We're seeing progress, but we continue on our journey. So that's what I think I had. We have 2 or 3 minutes left. If there are questions, happy to take this.